Enki, the scientist, had entered the genetics laboratory. He wasn't alone, and his sister Ninmah accompanied him. Together they produced a mysterious mixture. Two different species intertwined so that through the clay of the earth, artificial insemination would occur. And from this, a new being would be born. This wasn't the first time Enki had engaged in cloning activities, nor was it for Ninmah. But both of them still needed to improve and get used to the Earth's genetic material until their creation was ready. And so they said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness."
Indeed, this narrative seems like a science fiction movie. To claim that this happened in our past and in the creation of humans is blasphemy and a sin against the sacredness of biblical texts for many. However, the narrative is a work of fiction created from the reading of an ancient Mesopotamian text called Enki and Ninmah. In this video, we will analyze this text and seek evidence of genetic engineering in the creation of human beings. I remember having come across this text about 6 years ago. At that time, I was studying Mesopotamian tablets with translations available on official websites. Back then, I hadn't read the entirety of Zecharia Sitchin's works yet, but what I had read from Sitchin's work was already sufficient. I am naturally curious, an investigator, and also a skeptic since birth. It wasn't enough for me that Sitchin claimed to have found evidence of genetic engineering in the Mesopotamian texts. I needed to read it for myself with my own eyes and in reliable sources of information. What I'm going to offer you in this video is this possibility. For those who come to this channel and to this video, claiming that we are challenging the title of the divine creator, I need to be vehement. I need to remind you that Mesopotamian tablets are recent discoveries in human history, but predate the writing of the Hebrew Bible. Furthermore, the Mesopotamian clay tablets constitute the oldest human records on planet Earth, and this statement is supported by technical and scientific evidence. And to demonstrate to you the seriousness of this matter and this discovery, I want to demonstrate the veracity of the information. The tablet of the mythological text, Enki and Ninmah, is archived at the Penn Museum. According to the museum's information, the title of this tablet is Creation of Man, and its object number is CBS 2168. This tablet was found in 1889 and was written between 1900 and 1600 BCE. The museum's description states, half-baked clay, probably 1st dynasty of Isin revised date, creation of man text, biblical parallels. Therefore, you can understand the importance and representativeness of this text. The parallel with the Bible is explicitly mentioned by the museum itself. The probable date of the text's writing predates the presumed date of the writing of the book of Genesis in the Hebrew Bible. So we have to ask ourselves, is studying the Anunnaki topic the work of the devil? Are the Anunnaki the fallen angels? And if they are involved in the creation of man, which is attributed to Elohim in the Hebrew Bible, isn't it an interesting topic? Many viewers come to this channel and accuse me of being in league with Satan for giving voice to the fallen angels, causing them to lead people astray from the divine realms. In light of this, I ask myself and all of you, what is better? To remain blissfully ignorant and believe in a false and fabricated God? Or to have the courage to ask questions and uncover our deepest truths in the face of new discoveries? So, let's dare to investigate. Let's read the text and then discuss it further. In those days, in the days when heaven and earth were created, in those nights, in the nights when heaven and earth were created, in those years, in the years when the fates were determined, when the Anunna gods were born, when the goddesses were taken in marriage, when the goddesses were distributed in heaven and earth, when the goddesses became pregnant and gave birth, when the gods were obliged their food for their meals. The senior gods oversaw the work, while the minor gods were bearing the toil. The gods were digging the canals and piling up the silt in Harali. The gods, dredging the clay, began complaining about this life. At that time, the one of great wisdom, the creator of all the senior gods, Enki lay on his bed, not waking up from his sleep, in the deep Engur, in the flowing water, the place the inside of which no other god knows. The god said, weeping, "He is the cause of the lamenting." Nama, the primeval mother who gave birth to the senior gods, took the tears of the gods to the one who lay sleeping, to the one who did not wake up from his bed, to her son. "Are you really lying there asleep and not awake? The gods, your creatures, are smashing their... My son, wake up from your bed. Please apply the skill deriving from your wisdom and create a substitute for the gods so that they can be freed from their toil." At the word of his mother Nama, Enki rose up from his bed. In Halankug, his room for pondering, he slapped his thigh in annoyance. The wise and intelligent one, the prudent, of skills, the fashioner of the design of everything brought to life, birth goddesses. Enki reached out his arm over them and turned his attention to them. And after Enki, the fashioner of designs by himself, had pondered the matter, he said to his mother Nama, "My mother, the creature you planned will really come into existence. Impose on him the work of carrying baskets. You should knead clay from the top of the Abzu. The birth goddesses will nip off the clay, and you shall bring the form into existence. Let Ninmah act as your assistant, and let Ninmah, Kuziana, Ninmada, Ninbarag, Ninmug, and Ninguna stand by as you give birth. My mother, after you have decreed his fate, let Ninmah impose on him the work of carrying baskets." 6 lines fragmentary. Enki brought joy to their heart. He set a feast for his mother, Nama, and for Ninmah. All the princely birth goddesses ate delicate reed and bread. An, Enlil, and the Lord Nudimmud roasted holy kids. All the senior gods praised him. "O Lord of wide understanding, who is as wise as you? Enki, the great Lord, who can equal your actions? Like a corporeal father, you are the one who has the me of deciding destinies. In fact, you are the me." Enki and Ninmah drank beer. Their hearts became elated, and then Ninmah said to Enki, "Man's body can be either good or bad, and whether I make a fate good or bad depends on my will." Enki answered Ninmah, "I will counterbalance whatever fate, good or bad, you happen to decide." Ninmah took clay from the top of the Abzu in her hand, and she fashioned from it first a man who could not bend his outstretched, weak hands. Enki looked at the man who could not bend his outstretched, weak hands, and decreed his fate. He appointed him as a servant of the king. Second, she fashioned one who turned back, the light, a man with constantly opened eyes. Enki looked at the one who turned back, the light, the man with constantly opened eyes, and decreed his fate, allotting to it the musical arts, making him as the chief in the king's presence. Third, she fashioned one with both feet broken, one with paralyzed feet. Enki looked at the one with both feet broken, the one with paralyzed feet, and him for the work of, and the silversmith, and has instead she fashioned one, a third one, born as an idiot. Enki looked at this one, the one born as an idiot, and decreed his fate. He appointed him as a servant of the king. Fourth, she fashioned one who could not hold back his urine. Enki looked at the one who could not hold back his urine, and bathed him in enchanted water, and drove out the Namtar demon from his body. Fifth, she fashioned a woman who could not give birth. Enki looked at the woman who could not give birth and decreed her fate. He made her belong to the queen's household, as instead, as a weaver fashioned her to belong to the queen's household. Sixth, she fashioned one with neither penis nor vagina on its body. Enki looked at the one with neither penis nor vagina on its body and gave it the name Nibru eunuch, and decreed as its fate to stand before the king. Ninmah threw the pinched-off clay from her hand on the ground, and a great silence fell. The great Lord Enki said to Ninmah, "I have decreed the fates of your creatures and given them their daily bread. Come, now I will fashion somebody for you, and you must decree the fate of the newborn one." Enki devised a shape with head and mouth in its middle, and said to Ninmah, "Pour ejaculated semen into a woman's womb, and the woman will give birth to the semen of her womb." Ninmah stood by for the newborn, and the woman brought forth in the midst. In return, this was Umul. Its head was afflicted, its place of was afflicted, its eyes were afflicted, its neck was afflicted. It could hardly breathe. Its ribs were shaky, its lungs were afflicted, its heart was afflicted, its bowels were afflicted. With its hand and its lolling head, it could not put bread into its mouth. Its spine and head were dislocated. The weak hips and the shaky feet could not carry it on the field. Enki fashioned it in this way. Enki said to Ninmah, "For your creatures I have decreed a fate. I have given them their daily bread. Now, you should decree a fate for my creature. Give him his daily bread too." Ninmah looked at Umul and turned to him. She went nearer to Umul, asked him questions, but he could not speak. She offered him bread to eat, but he could not reach out for it. He could not lie on. He could not. Standing up. He could not sit down, could not lie down. He could not. A house. He could not eat bread. Ninmah answered Enki, "The man you have fashioned is neither alive nor dead. He cannot support himself." Enki answered Ninmah, "I decreed a fate for the first man with the weak hands. I gave him bread. I decreed a fate for the man who turned back, the light. I gave him bread. I decreed a fate for the man with broken, paralyzed feet. I gave him bread. I decreed a fate for the man who could not hold back his urine. I gave him bread. I decreed a fate for the woman who could not give birth. I gave her bread. I decreed the fate for the one with neither penis nor vagina on its body. I gave it bread. My sister?" 2 lines fragmentary. Ninmah answered Enki, 9 lines fragmentary. Ninmah's answer continues. "You entered. Look, you do not dwell in heaven. You do not dwell on earth. You do not come out to look at the land. Where you do not dwell, but where my house is built, your words cannot be heard. Where you do not live, but where my city is built, I myself am silenced. My city is ruined, my house is destroyed, my child has been taken captive. I am a fugitive who has had to leave the Ikur. Even I myself could not escape from your hand." Enki replied to Ninmah, "Who could change the words that left your mouth? Remove Umul from your lap. Ninmah, may your work be. You wrote for me what is imperfect. Who can oppose this? The man whom I shaped. After you go, let him pray. Today let my penis be praised. May your wisdom be confirmed. May the Enkum and Ninkum proclaim your glory. My sister, the heroic strength. The song, the writing. The gods who heard, let Umul build my house." Ninmah could not rival the great Lord Enki. "Father Enki, your praise is sweet." This is undoubtedly one of the most incredible texts available for reading on the internet. And if you want to read and study this text, the link is in the description of this video. Now that we have become acquainted with the text itself, let's engage in its analysis. The mythological account encompassed within these tablets has been recovered from various locations, adding to its intrigue. The primary sources of translation stem from the Old Babylonian period and were unearthed in Nippur. A third tablet, also from this era, emerged, containing a partial extract from the middle section of the myth. Additionally, within the library of Assurbanipal, a bilingual version in Sumerian and Akkadian was discovered, shedding further light on the narrative. Although fragmented, a tablet from the Middle Assyrian period has been identified, which may hold elements of the myth, but diverges from the bilingual version specifically in the creation segment. The myth of Enki and Ninmah can be divided into two distinctive parts, each carrying its own significance. The first part centers around the birth of mankind, while the second unveils a captivating competition between the two spouses. In the initial portion of the text, Enki, at the behest of Ninmah, whom he addresses as his mother, undertakes the creation of the first humans. Assisted by Ninmah and her 7 devoted servants, known as the birth goddesses, Enki skillfully molds the bodies of men and women. Once the task is completed, a joyous banquet ensues, where Enki and Ninmah indulge in beer while the other deities praise Enki's exceptional prowess. The latter half of the myth delves into a profound twist, as Ninmah, in her turn, fashions 7 humans afflicted with various illnesses and disabilities. Enki, displaying his wisdom and compassion, finds suitable roles for these individuals within society, ensuring their inclusion and support. However, in a demonstration of his remarkable abilities, Enki creates an individual so profoundly impaired that even Ninmah struggles to find a rightful place for them, resulting in her conceding the competition. Overwhelmed with frustration, she laments the fact that Enki has driven her away from her own abode. Regrettably, due to the tablet's damage, the conclusion of the text remains somewhat enigmatic. Nonetheless, it is likely that Enki, in his benevolence, consoles Ninmah and endeavors to find a suitable place for the extraordinary human he has brought into existence, thus offering resolution to their tumultuous competition and fostering harmony once again. The narrative is engaging and very intriguing, and here there is an important point for us to discuss. It is necessary to remember that the Lost Book of Enki is a work of fiction written by Zecharia Sitchin, as if it were an autobiographical account of Enki. That book and those tablets, as they were written in that way, do not actually exist. However, the Lost Book of Enki was written based on real tablets, and we have just come into contact with one of these absolutely extraordinary texts. Within the narrative of the Lost Book of Enki, we can find several points of convergence between this myth, Enki and Ninmah, and the 6th tablet. This tablet is featured in the Anunnaki movie 2 here on this channel, and can also be studied separately in the video dedicated to the 6th tablet of the Lost Book of Enki. It is important to clarify that at the moment I am republishing these tablets separately, so that studies on this subject can be conducted by those who wish to do so. In the 6th tablet of the Lost Book of Enki, we find the following narrative. In a crystal vessel Ninmah an admixture was preparing, the oval of a female 2-legged she gently placed, with me Anunnaki seed containing, she the oval impregnated, that oval back into the womb of the 2-legged female she inserted. This time there was conceiving, a birth was indeed forthcoming. The allotted time for birth giving the leaders awaited. With anxious hearts they results were seeking. The allotted time arrived. There was no birth giving. In desperation, Ninmah a cutting made. That which was conceived with tongs she drew out. A living being it was. With glee Enki shouted, "We attained!" Ningishida with joy cried out. In her hands Ninmah the newborn held. With joy she was not filled. Shaggy with hair all over was the newborn. His foreparts like of the earth creatures were. His hind parts to those of the Anunnaki more akin they were. They let the 2-legged female the newborn nurse, with her milk him to suckle. Fast was the newborn growing. What on Nibiru a day was, a month in the Abzu was. taller the Earth Child grew. In the image of the Anunnaki he was not. His hands for tools were not suited. His speech only grunting sounds was. "We must try once more," Ninmah was saying. "The admixture needs adjusting. Let me the ME's assay. With this or that, me make the endeavor." With Enki and Ninmah assisting, they repeated the procedures. The essences in the ME's Ninmah carefully considered. One bit she took from one bit she took out from another. Then, in the crystal bowl, the oval of an earth female, she inseminated. There was conception. At the appropriate time, there was birth-giving. This one more in the likeness of the Anunnaki was. They let his birth mother him suckle. They let the newborn to a child grow. Appealing he was by his looks. His hands to hold tools were shapen. His senses they tested. They found they're deficient. The earth child could not hear. His eyesight was faltered. Again and again, Ninmah rearranged the admixtures. Of the ME formula, she took bits and pieces. One being had paralyzed feet. Another, his semen was dripping. One had trembling hands. A malfunctioning liver had another. One had hands too short to reach the mouth. One had lungs for breathing unsuited. Enki, by the results, was disappointed. "A primitive worker is not attained." To Ninmah, he was saying, "What is good or is bad in this being by trials I am discovering?" Ninmah to Enki responded, "To continue for success, my heart prompts me." Once more an admixture she made. Once more the newborn was deficient. After reading what is written in the text, Enki and Ninmah, and what is written in the Lost Book of Enki, there is no doubt that a large part of the narrative originates precisely from this original Mesopotamian tablet that we are investigating. The greatest certainty lies in the names of Ninmah's assistants, which are found in the 6th tablet of the Lost Book of Enki, and also in the original text. Ninimah, Shuziana, Ninmada, Ninbara, Ninmug, Musardu, and Ninguna. However, it should be noted that in the Lost Book of Enki, it is mentioned that Ningishita would have recorded these names, while this information is not present in the narrative of the original tablet. And for a fair analysis, we need to consider that Sitchin's work is marvelous. And although the Book of Enki contains elements that are not present in the original tablets, this book, which presents the complete history of the Anunnaki, is filled with information that is indeed not found in the original narratives, and Sitchin intentionally did this to fill in the gaps that were missing to fit together a great puzzle of our true history. Soon, we will analyze what Sitchin has to say, specifically about this mythological text, Enki and Ninmah. For now, I want to bring a part of what a scholar, Assyriologist, and professor wrote in his book. The author in question is Samuel Noah Kramer. In his work, History Begins at Sumer, he presents a slightly different translation of this text. The translation Kramer provides includes the term image, as if Ninmah were shaping the clay of Abzu in the image of the Anunnaki gods. This is made clear and explicit in the translation he presents, which we will now observe. "O my mother, the creature whose name you uttered, it exists. Bind upon it the image of the gods. Mix the heart of the clay that is over the abyss. The good and princely fashioners will thicken the clay. Do you bring the limbs into existence? Ninmah, the Earth Mother goddess, will work above you. The goddesses of birth will stand by you at your fashioning. O my mother, decree it's the newborn's fate. Ninmah will bind upon it the image of the gods. It is man." Another interesting difference we find between the translation available on the internet and the translation provided by Samuel Kramer in his book is as follows. In the translation we read, we come across the term substitute when Nama, the primeval mother, instructs Enki in the creation of humans. The intention was to produce a substitute. But in this translation, there is a question mark regarding this term. Samuel Noah Kramer uses the term double. In his translation, it appears as, "O my son, rise from your bed, from your Work what is wise, fashion servants of the gods, may they produce their doubles. Doubles and substitutes are two interesting terms, because they can refer to two processes in a single word, the substitution of the work of the gods and duplication, where duplication can have a practical connotation regarding cloning work. And in this sense, we realize that even scholars find differences in their translations. Thus, we understand why it is so difficult for some people to accept the greatness of Zecharia Sitchin's work. And regarding this, I need to draw attention to a fact. The differences in translations and interpretations have created many controversies on the internet and among people studying this subject over time. I argue that we need to know and study Sitchin's work, but also the work of scholars, in addition to reading the tablets themselves. When we do this, we encounter terms like Ninmah, the primeval mother. This directly connects us to a feminine deity predating Enki and responsible for the creation of the first gods. This point is interesting, and we will dwell on it for a short while. Upon encountering Sitchin's theory, we have a ready-made answer regarding the Anunnaki and their history. Upon delving into the original Mesopotamian myths and academic references on the subject, we return to mystery and doubt. And this, for me, is a fundamental point. Sitchin's theory and the entire history he recounts provide us with many answers. But beyond the answers, we need the doubts because it is the doubts that lead us to another level of understanding. When we study the tablets of Mesopotamian creation, the Enuma Elish, we will understand that it is an important document, as it is the Mesopotamian cosmogony. And in that myth, we find the following translation of its first words. When the heavens above did not exist, and earth beneath had not come into being, there was Apsu, the first in order, their begetter and demiurge Tiamat, who gave birth to them all. They had mingled their waters together. With this first part of the text, and the Enki and Ninmah text we have just studied, well, brace yourself, because as we depart from Sitchin's theory and analyze things from another perspective, you will see how the mystery will leave you excited, full of doubts, but amazed at the same time. I'll leave an image for you to see. This is the Assyrian tree of life with a representation of the winged sun disk in the center. According to Sitchin, the winged figure, the winged sun disk, represents Nibiru. For academics, it's simply the winged sun disk, probably with the sun god Shamash in the center. For me, this image represents a spaceship very well. On the left and right, at both ends, we have the winged figures that, for many, are divine spirits, and for others, it is a representation of the god Apsu, one of the primordial gods. Apsu is the name of an Akkadian deity, also known as Abzu. According to Sitchin, the Abzu is the area where Enki finds the gold to be collected and taken to Nibiru, and it is the clay of the Abzu or Apsu, the material from which humans are created in the Enki and Ninmah myth. However, the Abzu is also something much deeper. If we observe the Enuma Elish, we find that Abzu was the first in order, one of the primordial gods. And later, Apsu and Tiamat, a female deity, mix their waters. Water, for the Greek philosopher Thales of Miletus, was the arche, the primordial substance from which all things arise, and, not by chance, the term archetype is formed by the union of these two words. So, in another understanding of the Enki and Ninmah text, we understand that one of the first deities created from Apsu and Tiamat, which is Ninmah, Enki's mother, calls him in a state of sleep to create humans. And humans are created from the clay of the Apsu. Now, if Apsu is a fundamental substance of the universe, the clay can be considered the mold or the form, a vessel that receives the Apsu, a fundamental, metaphysical, and ethereal substance. Thus, we expand our vision, understanding that our bodies were molded from fundamental substances of the creation of the universe. And for me, this is how we understand the divine within us. Well, After all this analysis, which I must say is mine, Lucas, the creator of this channel, and which I have recorded these ideas in my books, I want to return to the analysis of the text and of academics, and then we will see what Sitchin has to say about this. Don't leave this video, as it will continue to be interesting. I would like to highlight particularly a scientific article that I read to delve into this subject. In this article, the researcher himself mentions the term semen, although not specifically referring to the term genetic engineering. Let's go to the text. The scientific article is called The Embodied World: Creation Metaphors in the Ancient Near East. This article provides an analysis not only of this text, Enki and Ninmah, but also of other texts that we will analyze in the future, such as the Epic of Atrahasis. For now, let's focus on the analysis of this specific text in this video. I would like to draw attention to the author, Ronald Allen Simpkins. According to the information available on the official website of Creighton University, Ronald is professor in theology and classical and Near Eastern studies. He also directs the Kripke Center for the Study of Religion and Society. He completed his graduate studies at Harvard University in Near Eastern Languages and Civilization, with specialties in the history, literature, and religion of ancient Israel, Hebrew, and epigraphy. He regularly teaches courses on the Hebrew Bible, archaeology, and history. His academic interests include creation myths, gender studies, religion and the environment, the political economy of ancient Israel, and the social and cultural world of ancient Israel. After presenting his credentials, let's read a portion of the text written by him in this article. The Sumerian myth of Enki and Ninmah begins by describing the structure of the world that resulted from its initial creation, described as simply the fashioning of heaven and earth and the procreation of the gods. A great disparity existed between the major and the minor gods. On the minor gods fell the arduous task of maintaining the earth, particularly the work of dredging the rivers and canals. Fearful to approach Enki, the gods bring their complaint to Ninmah, Enki's mother and the mother who bore all the major gods. She intercedes on behalf of the minor gods and requests that Enki relieve their burden. With his ingenuity and wisdom, Enki considers the problem that Ninmah presents him. Remembering his own conception and birth from Ninmah, he conceives the idea of creating humans in the same way. Humans will be charged with the tasks of the minor gods. It will be their duty to maintain the earth by dredging the rivers and canals. Thus, Enki requests that Ninmah give birth to humans. O mother mine, since the sire who was once provided with air by you is still there, have the god's birth chair put together. When you have drenched even the core of the Apsu's fathering clay, Imma-In and Imma-Shar can make the fetus bigger. And when you have put limbs on it, may Ninmah act as your birth helper. And may Ninimah, Shuzidana, Ninmada, Ninshara, Ninbara, Ninmug, Dududu, and Ereshguna assist you at your giving birth. O mother mine, when you have determined its mode of being, may Ninmah put together the birth chair, and when, without any male, you have built it up in it, may you give birth to mankind. Ninmah then gives birth to a human. Enki clothes it, and all the minor gods rejoice. In this myth, Ninmah is able to give birth to humankind without any male because the fathering clay of Apsu is still within her. Ninmah, who is the power in the riverbed that gives birth to fresh spring water, Enki, takes on the more general role of Mother Earth in this myth. The fathering clay of Apsu was the clay beneath the surface of the earth from which the subterranean water, Enki, was born. The clay is analogous to semen. It provides what is essential for life to begin. Just as Enki was born out of Ninmah from this clay, so Ninmah can give birth to humans from the clay that remains. Humans are fashioned from the fathering clay of the Apsu and are born out of the earth, out of Ninmah, with the help of Ninmah, who serves as a midwife. I want to draw attention to the fact that the professor clearly states his interpretation. The clay is analogous to semen. It provides what is essential for life to begin. I want to remind you that this article is published in the Biblical Theology Bulletin Journal, and this article is an academic article from a rigorously scientific journal, including peer review. It's incredible how we can clearly perceive genetic engineering, the intervention of Enki and Ninmah in the creation of human beings. Of course, the scientist, the theology professor, could never assert vehemently that we are observing a very strong indication of genetic intervention in the creation of human beings. After all, what are we talking about in this text? Ninmah can give birth without the involvement of a male counterpart, and as the theology professor himself makes clear, clay is an analogy to semen, that is, the male genetic material. A woman who can give birth without the need for a man. And it's there, exists his genetic material, identified here as clay for her to conceive. This story seems familiar, doesn't it? I wonder what is more familiar, if it is the creation from clay or the fact that a woman can get pregnant and give birth without the need for a relationship with a man. Aren't these stories familiar to you too? It is interesting to note how these texts, articles, and analyses are always mentioned in a biblical sense. It is interesting to note how we are still entangled in an intricate web that always leads us to the Bible, always guiding us towards the idea of that one God, which we have already realized is an invented God, a product of a narrative constructed throughout time and forged by the ocean of ages. For those who still have doubts about this, I invite you to watch other videos on this channel to understand the historical path that perpetuated this God, this entity known as Yahweh, who transformed from one God among others to become the one and most worshipped on the entire planet Earth. I also draw attention to another interesting aspect. The largest religious denomination on our planet is Christianity. This religious denomination is built on a great lie. This is because it all starts with the sacraments, the first of which is baptism. Baptism is nothing more than the act of presenting a child to God, and with that, washing them in water. The act of washing in water is the act of cleansing this child from original sin, from the act that Adam and Eve did in the presence of God, eating the forbidden fruit. But we must question ourselves. What fruit is this? What act is this? If the term Eden mentioned in the Bible derives from the term Eden, a Sumerian term, why do we still give greater weight to the meaning of Eden according to the Bible itself? And what about original sin? Are we really tainted by sin? Are we born into this world stained by sin? If we perceive through Mesopotamian myths, which predate the Bible by many years, centuries, and millennia, a clear genetic intervention, should we still give thanks to the later text, in this case the Bible, as the fruit of divine and unequivocal word? Look, one of the biggest criticisms that I notice in the comments, both on the English channel Anunnaki Ancient Mystery and the Portuguese channel Logose Anunnaki, is the criticism that these questions are things of the devil, that the Anunnaki are fallen angels, and that the devil is inserting doubts in our minds to steer us away from the path of good and light, the path of the Holy Church. These comments, I must admit, give me more strength. This is because the critical arguments are not solid. On the contrary, they are completely empty in terms of argumentative support. They name an entity that does not exist, an entity invented for mass control. As we saw in another video, the Anunnaki are not fallen angels. Perhaps we can refer to the second generation of Anunnaki, or the offspring of the Anunnaki, as fallen angels. In comparison with the Hebrew Bible, the Anunnaki are the Elohim, and the role played by the invented God Yahweh is clearly represented in Sumerian mythology by various and different Anunnaki. If translators of biblical Hebrew, like Mauro Biglino, make it clear that Yahweh was one of the Elohim, the analysis of Mesopotamian texts makes the origin of these alterations very clear. The Anunnaki are the interveners indeed in the creation of humanity, and the myths of Mesopotamia make this very clear. In the future, we will analyze other myths that bring creation, such as the Enuma Elish and the Epic of Atrahasis. We will also study in depth the myth of Adapa and the prohibition of the food that Anu offers him. Anu here represents the heavens personified through his name. Today we will focus purely and more deeply on the text Enki and Ninmah. Before we proceed with this analysis, I would like to clarify an important point. Previously, we talked about baptism and how the sacrament was forged upon an adapted, invented, and adulterated story. But beyond this, I need to remember that the symbolic act of baptism, of immersing a child in water, is the act of truly presenting this child to the symbolic and archetypal feminine element. Water is a symbolic aspect of feminine origin. Water, in alchemy, is a solvent, meaning it dissolves anything. It is a profound element of alchemical transformation. It is also a symbol of the unconscious, mystery, the divine. In this specific case, it is necessary to observe the deep symbolism involved, so that we do not make our human experience in this world an experience involved in one of the opposite extremes, blind faith or unrestrained radicalism. I draw attention in this case to what I have already brought up in another video. Let us not lose the symbolic perspective on life and myths, analyzing situations and experiences in a deeper way than a superficial glance. Well, let's return to the analysis of the evidence of genetical engineering in the myth Enki and Ninmah. To do this, we will make use of Sitchin's work and his analysis, starting with the book The 12th Planet. Sitchin presents us with a thorough analysis of the appearance of the gods and also of our creation. Throughout ancient artwork depicting gods and humans, a clear resemblance can be observed. Despite the biblical admonition against worshipping pagan images, suggesting that the Hebrew God lacked any physical form or likeness, various accounts in the Genesis tale and other biblical reports indicate otherwise. The ancient Hebrew God could be directly encountered, engaged in wrestling matches, spoken to, and heard. This divine being possessed bodily features like a head, feet, hands, fingers, and even a waist. The biblical God and divine messengers resembled and behaved like humans because humanity was created to mirror the appearance and conduct of the gods. However, within this apparent simplicity lies a profound mystery. How could a newly formed creature be a near-perfect physical, mental, and emotional replica of the Anunnaki? How, indeed, was man brought into existence? For a long time, the Western world embraced the belief that man was intentionally created and placed on Earth to assert dominion over all other creatures. Then, in November 1859, a British naturalist named Charles Darwin published a treatise titled On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, or the Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life. The Christian world had already experienced some upheaval when prominent geologists started asserting, from 1788 onwards, that the Earth was vastly older than the roughly 5,500 years estimated by the Hebrew calendar. Moreover, the notion of evolution itself was not entirely new. Earlier scholars had already observed such a process, and even ancient Greek scholars as far back as the 4th century BCE compiled data on the evolutionary progression of animal and plant life. However, Darwin's work presented a groundbreaking revelation. All living beings, including man, were products of evolution. It challenged the prevailing belief that man was spontaneously generated. Unsurprisingly, the initial response from the Church was vehement. Nevertheless, as scientific evidence regarding the Earth's true age, evolution, genetics, and other biological and anthropological studies accumulated, the Church's opposition subsided. It appeared that the very words of the Old Testament became indefensible in light of these revelations. How could a God without a physical form and who exists universally alone declare, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness"? But are we truly nothing more than naked apes? Is the monkey merely a step away from us in evolutionary terms, and the tree shrew just a human who has yet to shed its tail and stand upright? As Sitchin demonstrates in the book The 12th Planet, modern scientists have begun to question these simplistic theories. Evolution can elucidate the general progression of life and the development of various life forms on Earth, starting from the simplest one-celled organisms and culminating in man. However, evolution fails to account for the sudden appearance of Homo sapiens, which seemingly occurred overnight in the vast expanse of time required by evolution, without any evidence of earlier stages indicating a gradual transition from Homo erectus. The hominid species belonging to the Homo genus indeed resulted from evolution. However, Homo sapiens, modern man, emerged through a remarkable, revolutionary event. Approximately 300,000 years ago, he inexplicably appeared millions of years earlier than anticipated. While scholars remain unable to provide an explanation, we possess one. The texts of ancient Sumer and Babylon hold the answer. The Old Testament also provides insight. Homo sapiens, modern man, was brought into existence by the ancient gods. And Sitchin makes it more clear some pages forward. He says, "The Anunnaki did not create the mammals or the primates or the hominids. The Adam of the Bible was not the genus Homo, but the being who is our ancestor, the first Homo sapiens. It is modem man as we know him that the Anunnaki created. The Anunnaki did not create man out of nothing. Rather, they took an existing creature and manipulated it to bind upon it the image of the gods. Man is the product of evolution, but modern man, Homo sapiens, is the product of the gods. For some time circa 300,000 years ago, the Anunnaki took ape man, the so-called Homo erectus, and implanted on him their own image and likeness. Evolution and the Near Eastern tales of man's creation are not at all in conflict. Rather, they explain and complement each other. For without the creativity of the Anunnaki, modem man would still be millions years away on the evolutionary tree. And then, later in the same book, we can observe that in his 1976 work, Sitchin affirms the same thing that the professor of theology had just affirmed in our present day. However, with the boldness that is characteristic of Sitchin's work, and that an academic could never do it. He says, if the clay onto which the godly element was mixed was an earthly element, as all texts insist, then the only possible conclusion is that the male sperm of a god, his genetic material, was inserted into the egg of an ape woman. To delve even deeper into our analysis, let's consider the reference to another work by Sitchin. This time, it's in the book, The Cosmic Code. In this book, Sitchin directly and specifically mentions the myth we're examining in this video, Enki and Ninmah. He states, specifically mentioned in the texts was a being who could not hold its urine, and a variety of malfunctions including eye and eyesight diseases, trembling hands, an improper liver, a failing heart, and sicknesses of old age. The text called Enki and Ninmah. The creation of mankind, besides listing more dysfunctions, rigid hands, paralyzed feet, dripping semen, also depicted Enki as a caring god who, rather than destroying such deformed beings, found some useful life for them. Thus, when one outcome was a man with faulty eyesight, Enki taught him an art that did not require seeing, the art of singing and the playing of a lyre. To all those, the text states, Enki decreed this or that fate. He then challenged Ninmah to try the genetic engineering on her own. The results were terrible. The beings she brought about had the mouth in the wrong place, a sick head, sore eyes, aching neck, shaky ribs, malfunctioning lungs, a heart ailment, inability to move the bowels, hands that were too short to reach the mouth, and so on and on. But as the trial and error continued, Ninmah was able to correct the various defects. Indeed, she reached a point that she became so knowledgeable of the Anunnaki hominid genomes that she boasted that she could make the new being as perfect or imperfect as she wished. How good or bad is man's body? As my heart prompts me, I can make its fate good or bad. We too have now reached the stage where we can insert or replace a certain gene whose role we have uncovered, and try to prevent or cure a specific disease or shortcoming. Indeed, a new industry, the biotechnology industry, has sprung up with a seemingly limitless potential in medicine and the stock market. We have even learned to perform what is called transgenic engineering, the transfer of genes between different species, a feat that is achievable because all the genetic material on this planet, from the lowest bacterium to the most complex being, man, of all living organisms that roam or fly or swim or grow, is made up of the same genetic ABC, the same nucleic acids that formed the seed brought into our solar system by Nibiru. Our genes are, in fact, our cosmic connection. Modern advances in genetics move along two parallel yet interconnected routes. One is to ascertain the human genome, the total genetic makeup of the human being. This involves the reading of a code that, although written with just 4 letters, A, G, C, T, short for the initials of the names given to the 4 nucleic acids that make up all DNA, is made up of countless combinations of those letters that then form words that combine into sentences and paragraphs, and finally a complete book of life. The other research route is to determine the function of each gene. That is an even more daunting task, facilitated by the fact that if that very same gene, genetic word, can be found in a simpler creature, such as a lowly bacterium or a laboratory mouse, and its function could be experimentally determined, it is virtually certain that the same gene in humans would have the same functions, or its absence, the same malfunctions. The discovery of genes related to obesity, for example, has been achieved that way. The ultimate goal of this search for the cause, and thus the cure, of human ailments and deficiencies is twofold: to find the genes that control the body's physiology, and those that control the brain's neurological functions. To find the genes that control the process of aging, the cell's internal clock of the span of life, the genes of longevity, and the genes that control memory, reasoning, intelligence. Experiments on laboratory mice on the one hand and on human twins on the other hand, and extensive researches in between, indicate the existence of genes and groups of genes that account for both. How tedious and elusive these research targets are can be illustrated by the conclusion of a search for an intelligence gene by comparing twins. The researchers concluded that there might be as many as 10,000 gene sites or genetic words responsible for intelligence and cognitive diseases, each playing a tiny part by itself. Sitchin's work is fantastic, but we will not delve further beyond this point. This is because we will have many other videos on the channel exploring these issues in depth. The main objective of this video was to present the original Mesopotamian text and analyze it, providing the wide audience that watches this channel with an original translation. Sitchin is often criticized for his translations of the tablets, even though he never officially claimed to have translated them himself. He merely used already established translations. Therefore, we can read them by ourselves and draw our own conclusions about it. Through our own reading, we can confirm what is in the text. And through careful observation, we can clearly see what is there. And Sitchin is not wrong. In fact, he is absolutely correct. We are observing a scientific experiment conducted in a highly technological laboratory. We are witnessing Enki and Ninmah, the scientists' siblings, the creator gods, the two beings who hide under the name Elohim in the Hebrew Bible, It is they themselves who are saying, "Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness." They are the Anunnaki. We are facing the scientific method, the trial and error, so that an experiment can be consolidated. It appears that we as a species are the result of this mixture and hybridization. Although the Anunnaki did not create our hominid ancestors, they manipulated our genetics and created us. Therefore, we are their children. We have finished the video, just as the text ends when Ninmah states that her accomplishments cannot reach his. Father Enki, your praise is sweet.